This is a case about a 16-year-old boy coerced by police officers into confessing to the most unimaginable crime of all, the murder of his own mother. And it was a lie that was constructed by the police in a way that made it absolutely certain that he would get convicted.
I went to school that morning, and at the end of the day, the world was turned upside down.
Raphael Burton and Keziah Burton were Jamaican immigrants. They met in London and got married and moved to the United States, and Hugh was their only child. Hugh, his mother and father lived on the second floor in a 3-flat house. They rented out the first and the third floors. This was a family that was beginning to build a home, and there was always a very strong, loving relationship between Hugh and his mom and Hugh and his dad. Whenever a parent is killed, other family members are going to be persons of interest. The police wanted to talk to Hugh. It was more of an interview and not an interrogation. And Hugh told them, look, if you want to find out who killed my mom, find her car. The second round of questioning was to get Hugh to come down to the police station to submit to a polygraph exam. But there was no polygrapher there. At that point, he was no longer a person of interest. He was their prime suspect. And the interrogation was much more confrontational and an effort to get him to confess. The first thing that they did is they accused him of lying. He kept saying, I was in school that day. I would never murder my mother. And then they made a variety of suggestions to him. We know that you were with your girlfriend in the afternoon. And by the way, did you know that she was underage and that you could be charged with statutory rape? You have two choices, Hugh. You could be charged with statutory rape and murder and be tried as an adult, or you could cop to the murder and be tried as a juvenile. And that kind of promise of leniency and threat of harm really broke Hugh down into a place where he believed it was in his best interest to confess in order to bring this interrogation to a close.
It's January 6th, 1989. It's 3:05 a.m. We're in the 47th Precinct Detective Supervisor's room. Now you've been arrested for the stabbing of your mother, Keisha Burton. Do you want to tell me what happened on the day of January 3rd, 1989?
If you look at Hugh's videotaped confession, there's a very rehearsed quality to it. And part of what makes it seem rehearsed is the language that he uses during the confession.
At this time, I'm stimulated on drugs. And didn't really know what I was doing.
No teenager talks about being stimulated by drugs. You get high.
A few of my friends proceeded northward up Bronxwood to come home. Reached home about 2:47 in the afternoon. I just wanted to scare, just wanted to scare a little bit, see what she was gonna do. Yeah, plus I was still stimulated.
It was the way a police officer would talk. The mere mention of the word crack cocaine in the midst of a crack cocaine epidemic, to me, is the most powerful evidence that this confession was constructed by the police to make it almost a certainty that Hugh Burton would be convicted. They were able to give the jury an explanation why this mild-mannered, loving child might have snapped and killed his mother. Emmanuel Green was a very different kind of person than Hugh Burton. He had a long criminal history record.
I just got out of prison, okay, 3.5 years ago. I was in prison for an alleged rape and also an attempted robbery.
Emmanuel Green had lied on his application when he rented the apartment, so the Burtons didn't have any idea about his prior criminal history. Once Hugh Burton confessed, the story of this teenage boy murdering his mother for crack cocaine was on the front page of every single newspaper in New York City. So when Emmanuel Green surfaced with Keziah Burton's cars, they had to figure out a way to try to harmonize these two accounts. If you look at his statements, they're wildly inconsistent. They suggest that he, in fact, was involved in the murder.
He took the knife and put it somewhere in his room, or he put it inside of his book bag. I really don't know. I was then in front of the house next to the door.
Because he knew details of the crime that only the true perpetrator would have known. That the knife that was found near Mrs. Burton's body was not the murder weapon. Only Emmanuel Green knew that. At the time, the Innocence Project was only working on DNA cases. So they referred the case to me because of my knowledge about false confessions. Hugh was out on parole, but he continued to insist that he was innocent. We brought the Innocence Project back into the case when a new district attorney was elected in the Bronx, and she had created a conviction integrity unit that could review cases like Hugh's, where there were serious questions about his innocence, but no DNA evidence to prove that he was innocent. I typed in the names of the officers who took Hugh Burton's confession, and I found that they had been accused of taking 2 false confessions in a murder case that had occurred within 6 months of their arrest of Hugh Burton. Detectives don't usually just take 1 false confession. We actually spoke to one of the men who had falsely confessed in that other case and saw many of the same patterns in Hugh Burton's case. We made that man, Dennis Koss, available to the district attorney's office. And after meeting him, they had a much better understanding, but of the ways in which they were coercing innocent people to confess to crimes they didn't commit.
One of the most interesting things is that I never asked myself how. I just knew that I had to. You realize when you have truth on your side, you know, even when they have things that seems like it's just mounted against you, but when you in your heart, you know, you're just clear in your heart and you have truth, you just know that somehow, some way, you know, you're going to get to the truth of it. Getting home for me was only half of the battle. I still had to say, okay, well, I have to prove my innocence. It's not just about clearing my name. It's about restoring the dignity of my family. Most guys inside prison, you're gonna do some type of exercise or working out. But I'm seeing guys who are twice my age and they're running around the yard, and I mean, they look like they didn't have any worries. They looked free while they were running. So I said, well, let me try it. And I tried it, and I couldn't get around the yard twice, you know. So being a person that I'm determined to see things through, I said, I'm gonna keep at it and keep at it. And when I started running and I got better at it, I started to use running as a means of clearing my head if something was on my mind. As I got better, I would see marathons on the television. I was saying, well, you know, when I get out of here one day, I'm gonna run a marathon. Finally, that day came. It was more than just running. For me, it was a victory lap around this city.
Many of the same tactics that produce false confessions are still in regular use by law enforcement today.
Still continuing to fight because there are more people that are like Hugh Burton, and some of them may never have a voice. So the future is making sure that we hold people accountable so things like this does not ever happen again. It can't happen again.